The city is already on fire before the first German soldier sets foot inside it. That should have been enough. That should have broken them. 1,000,000 artillery shells. Waves of bombers turning buildings into rubble and rubble into dust. The most powerful military machine in human history pointed at a single city on the banks of a river. And yet, the city did not fall. What happened at Stalingrad was not just a battle. It was something older than strategy, older than politics. It was a collision between human will and human limits, and what happens when one side simply refuses to discover where those limits are. This is not a story about armies. It is a story about what people are capable of when they have nothing left to lose and everything left to protect. The year is 1942. Germany has already conquered most of Europe. France fell in 6 weeks, Poland in less than a month. Country after country collapsed before the Wehrmacht like dominoes falling in slow motion. Adolf Hitler's armies are the most experienced, best equipped, most battle-hardened force on the planet. They have never lost a major campaign. They do not know what failure looks like. And now they are coming for the Soviet Union. Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of Russia, began in June 1941 with 3 million German soldiers crossing the border simultaneously. It was the largest military operation in human history. The Soviets were caught off guard. Entire armies were destroyed in weeks. Cities fell. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers were captured. By the winter of 1941, German forces could see the spires of Moscow through their binoculars, but Moscow held, barely, and now in the summer of 1942, Hitler changes his focus. He wants the south. He wants the oil fields of the Caucasus, the fuel that will power Germany's war indefinitely. And sitting directly in his path on the western bank of the Volga River is a city of 400,000 people. An industrial powerhouse, a city that produces tanks, artillery, and ammunition for the Soviet war machine. A city with a name that carries enormous symbolic weight, Stalingrad, the city of Stalin. Hitler makes a decision that will define the war. He will take it, not just for strategic reasons, for symbolic ones. If Stalin's city falls, Stalin's regime, he believes, falls with it. The Soviet people will lose faith. The war in the East will be won. Stalin makes the opposite decision with equal certainty. The city bearing his name cannot fall. It will not fall. He issues Order 227. 3 words summarize it. Not one step back. Soldiers who retreat will be shot. Officers who give the order to retreat will be shot. There is no retreat. There is no surrender. There is only the Volga at your back and the enemy in front of you. 2 men, 2 iron wills, 1 city caught between them. The German 6th Army, commanded by General Friedrich Paulus, is given the assignment. 300,000 soldiers, tanks, artillery, air support. The Luftwaffe has already been bombing Stalingrad for months. On August 23, 1942, a single day of bombing kills 40,000 civilians. The city burns so intensely that the Volga River itself appears to catch fire, oil from destroyed storage tanks spreading flames across the water. Paulus looks at Stalingrad from his command position and sees a city that has already been half destroyed. He expects it to fall within days. He has made a terrible miscalculation. The Soviets defending Stalingrad are not the same soldiers who broke in 1941. These men have been fighting for a year. They have watched their country burn. They have buried their families. They have learned something that cannot be taught in any military academy. They have learned how to survive the unsurvivable. And their commander, General Vasily Chuikov, understands something that Paulus does not. The rubble is not a problem. The rubble is the solution. German tanks are unstoppable in open ground. German air power is lethal against any fixed defensive line in the open. German coordination between infantry and armor has never been matched by any army on Earth. But in a city, especially a destroyed city, tanks cannot maneuver. Air power cannot distinguish friend from enemy in the chaos of close-quarters combat. The sophisticated coordination that makes the Wehrmacht so deadly in the field becomes useless when the battlefield is a collapsed building where men are fighting 3 feet apart. Chuikov gives the order that will define the entire battle. Hug the enemy. get so close to the German lines that the Luftwaffe cannot bomb without hitting their own men, fight in every room. Fight on every staircase, fight for every piece of broken wall, make this city a maze, make it a grinder. The Germans call what happens next Rattenkrieg, rat war, and it begins. German soldiers advance into Stalingrad expecting a broken, demoralized enemy. What they find instead is something out of nightmare. Soviet soldiers hidden in every piece of rubble. Snipers behind every shattered wall, machine gun nests in every collapsed building. The moment German infantry enters a street, fire comes from 3 directions simultaneously. They take a building and the Soviets emerge from the floor below through tunnels and fight them from beneath. They clear a basement and find a hidden passage leading to another building 50 meters away that Soviet soldiers are already occupying. The city has become a 3-dimensional labyrinth of death. And then something happened that made this battle legendary. Something that showed the world what one man, one ordinary, unremarkable man, can do when the stakes are absolute. A warehouse on the bank of the Volga, Pavlov's house. Sergeant Yakov Pavlov is ordered to scout a 4-story apartment building near the central square. He takes a small team. They fight their way in. They find it occupied by a handful of civilians sheltering in the basement. They hold it. Then Pavlov looks at the building, looks at his map, and understands something. This building has clear lines of fire in all directions. Whoever holds it controls movement in this entire section of the city. He sends for reinforcements. He receives 25 men total. 25 soldiers, 1 apartment building against the full weight of the German 6th Army. Pavlov's men dig anti-tank ditches around the perimeter. They lay mines. They punch holes through the internal walls so they can move between positions without going outside. They set up machine guns at every window. They create firing positions in the rubble surrounding the building. They fortify every floor. They prepare for everything. The Germans attack. They are pushed back. They attack again with armor. The tanks are stopped by the anti-tank ditches and mines. They bring artillery. The building shakes. Walls collapse. Dust fills every room. Men fight half-blinded. Half-deafened, they hold. For 58 days, Pavlov's 25 men hold that building. The German 6th Army with 300,000 soldiers cannot take 1 apartment block defended by 24 men and a sergeant who simply decided that this building would not fall. More soldiers will die trying to capture Pavlov's house than died in the German capture of France. But this is just 1 building. Across the entire city, the same story plays out 1,000 times. Soviet soldiers fighting for individual rooms, for individual staircases. The main railway station changes hands 14 times in a single day. A grain elevator holds for weeks against repeated attacks. The tractor factory, still producing tanks even as fighting happens on the factory floor, becomes a battlefield where workers pick up rifles when the soldiers fall and keep fighting. And still the city holds, but here is what you must understand. Holding the city is not the plan, holding the city is the distraction. While the German 6th Army grinds itself to pieces inside the rubble of Stalingrad, losing men by the thousands every week, exhausting its ammunition, burning through its fuel. Stretching its supply lines to the breaking point, something enormous is happening on the flanks. Soviet General Georgy Zhukov has been quietly assembling one of the largest military forces ever gathered. Over 1 million soldiers, thousands of tanks, thousands of artillery pieces. Positioned on both sides of Stalingrad, north and south, waiting, the German flanks protecting Paulus and his 6th Army are held not by Germans but by Romanian and Italian allied forces, brave men. But under-equipped, under-armored, spread thin across enormous stretches of frozen steppe. Zhukov calls his operation Operation Uranus, and on November 19, 1942, it begins. 3,500 Soviet artillery pieces open fire simultaneously. The sound rolls across the steppe like the end of the world. The Romanian armies on the northern flank collapse within hours. Soviet tanks pour through the gap. The next day, the southern prong of the attack launches against the Italian positions. They collapse too. Soviet armored columns race across the snow-covered plains, not towards Stalingrad, but around it. They are not trying to liberate the city. They are trying to surround the German army inside it. On November 23, 1942, the two Soviet armored spearheads meet at the town of Kalach, 90 kilometers west of Stalingrad. The circle closes. The German 6th Army, 300,000 soldiers, is completely surrounded. Paulus radios Hitler. He requests permission to break out before the ring tightens further. He can still fight his way out. It will mean abandoning Stalingrad, but it will save the army. Hitler refuses, not one step back. Paulus is ordered to hold his position. Hermann Göring, commander of the Luftwaffe, promises to supply the surrounded army by air. His staff tells him it is impossible. The army needs 700 tons of supplies per day. The Luftwaffe, at maximum effort in these conditions, can deliver perhaps 100. Göring makes the promise anyway. The airlift fails almost immediately. Soviet fighters and anti-aircraft guns destroy transport planes faster than they can be replaced. Winter deepens. Temperatures drop to -40 degrees. Frostbite kills men faster than bullets. The surrounded German soldiers, who were fighting through rubble and summer uniforms because Hitler believed the campaign would be over before winter, begin to freeze. They eat their horses. Then the horses' harnesses. Men who have not eaten in days fight with the last of their strength because there is nothing else to do. December becomes January. Hitler finally permits the attempt of a relief effort. A German armored force pushes from the west, fighting through Soviet defenses, trying to reach the trapped army. They get within 48 kilometers of the pocket. They can hear the artillery. They cannot get closer. The relief attempt is beaten back. The pocket begins to shrink. Soviet forces tighten the ring. German soldiers, starving and frostbitten, fight for every block of territory inside the shrinking perimeter. Not to win, just to survive one more day. On January 8, 1943, the Soviets offer terms. Surrender honorably, your lives will be spared, you will be treated as prisoners of war. Paulus consults Hitler. Hitler orders him to refuse. Fight to the last man, fight to the last bullet. The final Soviet offensive begins on January 10. The German pocket is split in half, then into smaller pieces. Communication breaks down, units fight in isolation. Men who have not eaten in days hold positions they know cannot be held because they have been ordered to hold them and there is nothing left in them to disobey. On January 30, 1943, the 10th anniversary of Hitler coming to power, Paulus sends his last radio message. He is in the basement of a department store. Soviet soldiers are in the building above him. The next morning, he surrenders. 91,000 German soldiers march into Soviet captivity. Starving, frostbitten, broken. Of those 91,000, fewer than 6,000 will ever return to Germany. Most will die in Soviet prisoner of war camps in the months and years ahead. The lucky ones, the ones who did not die in the ruins of the city they were sent to capture. The total losses, German, Soviet, civilian, are almost impossible to comprehend. Conservative estimates put the number of dead at Stalingrad at over 2 million human beings, 2 million people. In one city, in 6 months, when news of the German defeat reaches Germany, it breaks something in the German national psyche that never fully heals. For the first time in the war, German radio broadcasts 3 days of national mourning. For the first time, ordinary German citizens, not soldiers, not generals, understand that the war might be lost. They are right. From this moment, the Germans are retreating in the east, slowly. Painfully fighting for every mile, but retreating. The momentum of the war has shifted permanently. The Soviet Union, which was supposed to collapse in weeks under the weight of the most powerful military machine ever assembled, has not only survived, it has begun to advance. The road from Stalingrad to Berlin will take 2 more years and cost millions more lives, but it begins here. In the rubble of a city that refused to die. What does it mean? Why does Stalingrad still matter 80 years later? It matters because of what it proved. It proved that military power, numbers, technology, training is not the only thing that determines the outcome of war. It proved that geography can be a weapon, that rubble can be a fortress. That exhaustion can be an ambush, but more than strategy, more than tactics, Stalingrad proved something about human beings. It proved that people can endure things that should be unendurable. That soldiers with nothing left, no food, no shelter, no hope of rescue, can still choose to hold the line. That the decision to keep fighting, made in the dark by a frozen man who cannot feel his fingers, is one of the most powerful forces in human history. Pavlov's 25 soldiers holding one building for 58 days, Chuikov hugging the enemy so close that their own air power becomes useless. Zhukov waiting, calculating, assembling, striking at exactly the right moment. None of them were sure it would work. None of them knew they were changing history. They were just doing the next thing. And then the next, and then the next. The Volga is still there. The river that Soviet soldiers had at their backs, the river they were told they could not cross. The river that meant there was nowhere to retreat, it still flows through what is now called Volgograd. On the western bank there is a memorial, a giant stone statue of a woman, sword raised, mouth open in a cry of defiance. She is 85 meters tall. She faces west. Toward the direction the German army came from, they called her the Motherland Calls. She is still calling. Sometimes history is not decided by who has the most tanks, or the most planes, or the most generals with the most impressive plans. Sometimes history is decided by a sergeant with 25 men and an apartment building and the simple, unbreakable decision that this, right here, right now, is where it stops.